My name is Loretta Mae Johnson, and last Thursday at 7:43 p.m., I watched my husband of 32 years walk into a house I'd never seen before, carrying the same duffel bag he took to the lodge every week. Except this time, a woman I didn't recognize opened the door wearing nothing but his old college t-shirt. That shirt. Lord have mercy. That Tuskegee University shirt with the faded golden letters that I'd washed probably 500 times over the years. The one with the small bleach stain near the hem from when our daughter Keisha tried to do laundry at 13. The one Marcus claimed he'd donated to Goodwill last spring, along with those old khakis I'd been begging him to throw away for years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because if you're watching this story right now, you need to know that I'm not some young woman still learning about life and love. I'm 62 years old, been retired from my position as principal of Carver Middle School for 3 years now, and I thought, genuinely believed, that I knew everything there was to know about Marcus Eugene Johnson. We live in Birmingham, Alabama, in the same four-bedroom colonial we bought back in 1995 when property in the Crestwood neighborhood was still affordable for a teacher and a city utility supervisor. That house has seen us through everything. 3 children growing up and moving out. My mama's final years when we converted the dining room into her bedroom because she couldn't climb stairs anymore. 5 grandchildren taking their first steps on those original hardwood floors we've refinished twice. If you're connecting with my story already, please hit that like button to let this grandmother know she's not talking to herself. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Because what I discovered that Thursday night changed not just my marriage, but everything I thought I understood about the man I'd shared my bed with for over 3 decades. Now, Marcus and I, we had what everybody called a good marriage, not perfect. Lord knows we had our moments, but solid, dependable. The kind of marriage our children's friends envied because we still held hands at the grocery store and kissed each other goodbye every morning. Even after 32 years, Marcus still brought me coffee in bed every Sunday, made just right with 2 sugars and that hazelnut creamer I pretend is too expensive but secretly love. The Thursday Lodge meeting started about 18 months ago, right after Marcus's friend Jerome went through that ugly divorce. You know the kind, where both parties end up broker than they started and the lawyers drive off in new Mercedes. Jerome needed support, Marcus said, and a group of men from our church had started meeting every Thursday at the Masonic Lodge on 3rd Avenue North. They'd play cards, talk about life, sometimes have a fish fry if somebody had been lucky at Logan Martin Lake that week. Baby, you know Jerome's struggling, Marcus had said that first Thursday, standing in our bedroom doorway with a fresh duffel bag he'd bought from Dick's Sporting Goods. Us men, we don't talk about our feelings the way y'all women do. This gives us a space to just be ourselves, help each other through things. And I was happy about it. Genuinely happy. After 40 years in education, nobody understands the importance of community support better than me. Besides, retirement had been an adjustment for both of us. All that togetherness after decades of separate routines. Having Thursday evenings to myself seemed like a blessing. I could watch my shows without Marcus complaining about the drama, call my sister Patricia in Memphis without watching the clock, or just sit in the blessed quiet with a glass of wine and a good book. Tell me in the comments right now where you're watching from and what time it is there. Are you in Birmingham like me, Atlanta, Houston, or somewhere completely different? And be honest, would you have been suspicious if your husband suddenly started a new weekly routine after retirement? Sometimes I wonder if I was too trusting or just too comfortable to see what was right in front of me. The first sign something was off came about 3 months in. Marcus came home from the lodge one Thursday, and when he kissed me goodnight, he smelled different. Not like another woman's perfume. I would have noticed that immediately. It was his own cologne that was different. Instead of the Old Spice he'd worn since our dating days at Tuskegee, there was something more expensive, more sophisticated. Like that stuff they spray on you at Dillard's when you're just trying to walk through to get to the shoe department. New cologne? I asked, trying to sound casual as he slid into bed beside me. Oh, Jerome gave all of us a bottle, some brand his ex used to buy him, said he couldn't stand to smell it anymore. Marcus yawned, turned his back to me, and within minutes was snoring that soft rumble I'd grown accustomed to over the years. The second sign was the phone. Marcus had always been terrible with technology. This man once called me from Best Buy nearly in tears because he couldn't figure out how to turn on a display iPad. But suddenly he was on his phone constantly, texting with his thumbs flying like our teenage granddaughter. And when notification sounds came through, he'd flip that phone face down quicker than a blackjack dealer in Vegas. Then came the receipts. Lord, the receipts. I wasn't snooping, let me be clear about that. I was doing what I'd done every Friday for 3 decades, emptying his pockets before starting the laundry. But these receipts weren't from the lodge. They were from places like Firebird's Wood, Fired Grill in Hoover, total bills of $80–90, from a Chevron station in Pelham, nowhere near the lodge or our usual routes, from Belk for a purchase of $150.43 paid in cash. Since when does the lodge meet at Firebird's? I asked one Friday, holding up the receipt. Marcus looked at it, then at me, his face doing that thing it does when he's calculating his words. Oh, that. Sometimes we grab dinner before the meeting. You know how it is. Retired men with time to kill. But here's what struck me. Marcus hated Firebirds, called it overpriced food for people trying to pretend they're fancier than they are. We'd been there exactly once for our nephew's college graduation dinner, and Marcus complained the entire ride home about paying $18 for a hamburger he could make better himself. The Thursday that changed everything, last Thursday, started like any other. Marcus showered at 4:30, put on his good jeans and that brown polo shirt that brings out his eyes. He kissed me goodbye at 5:15, grabbed his duffel bag from the hall closet, and headed out to his Tahoe. But this time, something in my spirit said, follow him. Maybe it was the way he'd been extra attentive that morning, making me breakfast and asking about my plans for the evening. Maybe it was finding that Belk receipt and knowing they'd been having a sale on women's jewelry. Or maybe it was just 62 years of living teaching me that when your gut speaks, you better listen. So I waited exactly 5 minutes, grabbed my keys, and got in my Honda Accord. My hands were shaking as I backed out of our driveway. 32 years of marriage, and I was about to follow my husband like some private investigator on one of those TV shows. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand who Marcus Johnson really was, or at least who I thought he was. Marcus Eugene Johnson walked into my dormitory lobby at Tuskegee University on September 3, 1982, carrying a toolbox and wearing a smile that made me forget every word of the sociology paper I was trying to write. He wasn't even there for me. My roommate Shanice had put in a work request about our radiator making unholy noises at night, and Marcus was part of the student maintenance crew, working his way through his engineering degree by fixing what other students broke. But when he saw me sitting there in my pink and green Alpha Kappa Alpha sweatshirt, surrounded by textbooks and index cards, he stopped mid-step. "Excuse me, sister," he said, and I still remember how his voice carried this mix of confidence and genuine respect. "You wouldn't happen to know if there's a Loretta Mae Williams in this building? I'm supposed to check on a radiator problem." "That's me," I said, trying not to smile too hard at how he'd called me sister, not baby or sweetheart like most college boys did. "But it's my roommate's complaint. Thing sounds like it's trying to communicate with aliens every night around 2 a.m. He laughed, this deep, genuine laugh that started in his chest, and said, "Well, let's see if we can get those aliens to find another channel." 40 minutes later, he'd fixed the radiator, explained the whole problem with air bubbles in the system, and somehow gotten me to agree to coffee at the student union. Not a date, he was careful to specify. Just coffee between two hardworking students trying to make something of themselves. That coffee turned into study sessions. Study sessions turned into walks around campus discussing everything from James Baldwin to whether the Commodore's new album could touch their old stuff. By Thanksgiving, when he met my mama and daddy in Montgomery, we both knew this was different, permanent. We married 2 years after graduation, June 1986, at Mount Olive Baptist Church right here in Birmingham, where his family had been members for 3 generations. His mother, Miss Euline, made my dress herself, ivory satin with pearl buttons she'd been collecting since Marcus was in high school, she said, saving them for the woman who'd finally slow her boy down. Marcus became a deacon at Mount Olive in 1993. I can still see him that Sunday, standing at the altar in his navy suit, right hand raised as he took the oath. Our children, Keisha was 9, Marcus Jr. 7, and little Damon just 4, sat beside me in the pew, dressed in their Sunday finest, watching their daddy become what the pastor called a pillar of God's house. And that's exactly what he was, a pillar. Every Sunday, Marcus stood at those church doors, greeting members with a handshake for the men, a respectful hug for the women, and peppermints from his pocket for the children. When Sister Washington's husband died, Marcus organized the men to maintain her yard for a full year, showing up every Saturday morning with mowers and hedge trimmers. When the youth group needed to raise money for their mission trip to Haiti, he convinced his supervisor at the city to donate the materials so they could have a proper fish fry fundraiser. We built our life careful and deliberate, like Marcus approached everything. Our first house on the west side, a 2-bedroom rental where the kitchen faucet dripped no matter how many times he fixed it, and the bedroom window painted shut. But we made it home. I taught 5th grade at Hudson Elementary. Marcus worked his way up from junior engineer to system supervisor at Birmingham Waterworks. Every financial decision calculated, every sacrifice purposeful. When we bought the house in Crestwood, Marcus spent 3 months of Saturdays renovating before we moved in. Stripping wallpaper, refinishing those hardwood floors on his hands and knees, installing ceiling fans in every room because he knew I ran hot at night. "We're building something permanent here, Reddy," he'd say, using the nickname only he called me. "Something our grandkids will remember." Sunday dinners at our house became legendary. Every week without fail, that dining room table extended to its full length, covered with my grandmother's lace tablecloth. Fried chicken so good it'd make you want to slap somebody. Mac and cheese with 5 different cheeses because Marcus insisted if you're going to do something, do it right. Collard greens seasoned with smoked turkey because we were trying to be healthier, though Marcus would sneak ham hocks in when I wasn't looking. Cornbread, potato salad, and whatever pie struck my fancy that week. Sweet potato, pecan, sometimes that lemon icebox pie his mother taught me before she passed. The kitchen would fill with voices. Our kids arguing over who got the last piece of chicken. My sister Patricia's loud laugh. Marcus's brother Ronald telling the same stories about their childhood in Collegeville. Grandkids running through the house despite being told 17 times to slow down. And Marcus at the head of the table, leading Grace with a voice that carried such certainty, such gratitude. When Mama got sick in 2015, really sick with the cancer spreading faster than prayers could chase it, Marcus never hesitated. "We're bringing Miss Lillian home," he announced, like it was already decided. He took time off work to help me convert the dining room, installed safety rails in the bathroom, drove her to every chemotherapy appointment when I was too emotional to trust myself behind the wheel. Those last 3 months, he'd sit with her in the evenings while I graded papers or cooked dinner. I'd hear them through the wall, Mama telling stories about picking cotton in Lowndes County, Marcus asking questions like he was hearing them for the first time, even though she'd told them 100 times before. When she passed that December, holding both our hands, Marcus wept like I'd never seen. "She loved you like you were her own blood," I told him. "That's because I was," he said. The moment I married you, I became hers. Our retirement plans filled 3 notebooks. Marcus had it all mapped out. The RV we'd buy, not too big but nice enough for comfort. The route we'd take to see all 37 national parks east of the Mississippi first, then tackle the western ones. The apartment we'd keep in Birmingham for when grandkids were born or holidays came around. He had spreadsheets, actual spreadsheets, calculating gas costs and campground fees, planning for every contingency because that's who Marcus was, a man who left nothing to chance. When I retire, he'd say, pulling me close on the porch swing we'd installed for our 25th anniversary, it's going to be just you and me, Reddy, making up for all those years of work schedules and obligations. He retired first, December 2021, after 36 years with the city. I watched him clean out his office, bringing home boxes of commendations, photos from company picnics, that brass nameplate I'd bought him when he made supervisor. The plan was for me to follow in June 2022 and we'd start our adventures that fall. But retirement changed him in ways I didn't expect. This man who'd scheduled his entire life suddenly had 8 empty hours every day. He reorganized the garage twice, started 17 different projects around the house, drove me absolutely crazy hovering while I was trying to prepare lessons for my final semester. Now, thinking back, I wonder if that restlessness was the beginning, if that empty space in his days created room for things that shouldn't have been there. Let me ask you something, and be honest in the comments. Have you ever looked back at your relationship and spotted the exact moment things started to shift? Not dramatically, but just a subtle change in the rhythm you'd grown accustomed to? Because looking back now, I can see it clear as day. Retirement unsettled something in Marcus that had been held in place by routine and responsibility for so long. So when Marcus suddenly needed man time at the lodge every Thursday, I didn't just accept it, I celebrated it. The first Thursday Marcus came home from the lodge without smelling like fish, cigarette smoke, or beer, I actually complimented him on finally learning to air himself out before walking through my door. "Look at you," I said, meeting him in the hallway that night in early October. "Finally figured out that Febreze in your truck works for more than just covering up fast food smells." He laughed, but it was different, shorter, like he was cutting it off before it could fully form. "Yeah, well, Jerome's been getting on us about secondhand smoke, says his doctor's been lecturing him." That should have been my first real clue. Jerome Mitchell had been smoking Newport since 11th grade and wouldn't quit if Jesus himself came down and asked personally. But I let it slide, the way you do when you've been married so long that questioning every little thing feels like more work than it's worth. The lodge meetings had been going on for about 6 months by then. Every Thursday, like clockwork, Marcus would leave at 5:15, come home around 10:30, sometimes later if they got deep into their card games. He'd tell me stories about the conversations, how Brother Washington was dealing with his diabetes, how Deacon Harris's son finally got that promotion at Regions Bank. Normal things, believable things. But then came the Wednesday ATM visits. I only noticed because I was balancing our checkbook. Yes, I still do that the old-fashioned way with a pen and everything. Don't judge me. Every Wednesday afternoon, $300. Cash withdrawal from the Wells Fargo on Highway 280. When I asked Marcus about it, he was ready with an answer. Lodge dues plus we all chip in for food drinks. You know how it is. $300 every week for lodge dues and snacks? Even with inflation, that seemed steep. But Marcus handled the investment accounts, I handled the household bills. That was our system for 32 years. Trust and delegation, the foundation of a good marriage. The night his story didn't match Jerome's changed everything. It was a Thursday in November, the week before Thanksgiving. Marcus had left for the lodge as usual, but around 7, Jerome called the house looking for him. "Hey, Sister Johnson." Jerome's gravelly voice came through the landline. "Marcus there. He was supposed to lend me his socket wrench set." I felt something cold slide down my spine. "He's at the lodge with you, Jerome." There was a pause. Then Jerome, bless his heart, tried to cover. Oh, right. Must have got my days mixed up. You know how it is when you're retired. Every day feels like Saturday. But Jerome was a terrible liar, always had been. In all the years I'd known him, the man couldn't even lie about his weight at the doctor's office without sweating through his shirt. When Marcus came home that night at 10:45, I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I watched him. Watched how he went straight to the shower without stopping to tell me about his evening first. Watched how he put his clothes directly in the washer instead of the hamper. Watched how he climbed into bed and turned his back to me, pretending to fall asleep within minutes. 2 weeks later, I found the receipt from Seasons 52 in Hoover, $93 and change, paid at 8:17 p.m. on a Thursday. The same Thursday he'd texted me that they were having such a good time at the lodge that he might be later than usual. "What's this?" I asked, holding the receipt up when he came in from mowing the lawn that Saturday. Marcus glanced at it, then at me, and I saw him calculating behind his eyes. "Oh, that. Took Jerome out for his birthday. Figured he deserved something nicer than lodge food after everything with the divorce." Jerome's birthday is in March? I know because I've made him a German chocolate cake every year for the past 15, but I didn't say that. Instead, I filed it away with all the other inconsistencies that were piling up like leaves in fall. The defensive reaction started after that. Simple questions like, "How was the lodge?" would get sharp responses. "Fine, Loretta. Same as always. Why you asking?" Or I'd mention maybe visiting my cousin in Atlanta on a Thursday, and he'd immediately say, "Don't change your plans on my account. I know you think I can't manage one evening without you checking up on me." I wasn't checking up. At least I hadn't been. But now every Thursday took on weight, significance. I started noticing details I'd overlooked before. How he'd shower and shave before the lodge, putting on cologne for a bunch of old men playing spades. How his phone, which used to sit on the counter while he got ready, now stayed in his pocket. How he stopped telling me stories about the lodge meetings unless I specifically asked. The intimacy changed too, and if you're watching this as a married woman, you know exactly what I mean. Thursday nights he'd come to bed and barely touch me, like his mind was still somewhere else. But Fridays he was extra attentive, extra affectionate, like he was trying to make up for something or maybe convince himself of something. 32 years of marriage teaches you your partner's rhythms, and this new pattern felt like a song played in the wrong key. Then came the watch. It was a Thursday in early February, cold enough that Marcus wore his leather jacket, the one I'd bought him for his 50th birthday. He came home wearing a watch I'd never seen before. Silver, expensive looking, with a blue face that caught the light when he moved his wrist. "That new?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He looked down at it like he'd forgotten it was there. "This?" "No, had it for years. Found it in the drawer when I was cleaning out the dresser." We've shared a dresser for 3 decades. I know every cufflink, every old wallet, every random button in those drawers. That watch had never been in our house before that night. That's when I called. Patricia, my older sister living in Memphis, married to her Harold for 38 years. If anybody could tell me if I was being paranoid or perceptive, it was her. "Girl," she said, after I'd laid out everything, "you know what Mama used to say? When a man starts caring about his appearance after years of not caring, he's either got a new job or a new woman, and Marcus is retired." "But Patricia, this is Marcus, Deacon Marcus, the man who still tears up during the offering prayer." "Loretta May," she said, using my full name the way she did when we were kids, and she was trying to make me understand something important. Good men do bad things sometimes. Not because they're bad people, but because they're human people. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What I did was start paying attention with intention. The next Thursday, I watched him get ready. Noticed how he trimmed his mustache with the precise trimmer Keisha bought him for Christmas. Saw him check his appearance in the full-length mirror twice, something he'd never done before unless we were heading to church or a funeral. When he kissed me goodbye, I smelled that cologne again. Not Old Spice, but something with sandalwood and bergamot. Words I only knew because I'd gone to Dillard's and asked the girl at the fragrance counter to help me identify it. Tom Ford, she'd said, about $200 a bottle. If you're watching this right now and your spirit is telling you something's off in your relationship, please listen to it. Don't do what I did. Don't explain it away, rationalize it, file it under retirement adjustment, or midlife crisis, or whatever label makes it easier to swallow. That voice inside you, that instinct that's kept women safe since the beginning of time, it knows. It always knows. Drop a comment right now if you've ever had that feeling, that shift in your gut that says something's wrong even when you can't prove it. Tell me I'm not alone in this. Tell me you understand what it's like to doubt the person you trust most while doubting yourself for doubting them. That Thursday night in February, Marcus came home at 11:15, the latest he'd ever been. His shirt was different from the one he'd left in. Same color, similar style, but the buttons were mother of pearl instead of plastic. When I asked about it, he said he'd spilled barbecue sauce on the original and Jerome had lent him one of his. Jerome is 6'3" and weighs about 270. Marcus is 5'10", maybe 190 after holiday dinners. Nothing of Jerome's would fit Marcus unless Jerome had a secret closet of clothes from his high school days. That's when I made the decision that would shatter every illusion I had about my marriage. I cleared my schedule for the next Thursday. That Thursday morning, I made Marcus's breakfast with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Scrambled eggs with cheese, turkey bacon crispy the way he likes it, and wheat toast with real butter because he says that margarine stuff tastes like plastic. "You feeling all right, Reddy?" he asked, looking up from his Birmingham news. "You seem jumpy." I forced myself to turn from the stove, smile, act like this was any other morning. Just thinking about all I need to get done today. Book club moved our meeting to this afternoon and I haven't finished the book yet. The lie came out smoother than I expected. Maybe after months of watching him lie to me, I'd learned something about deception myself. Marcus nodded, already back to reading about Alabama football recruiting. Spring practice news, even though it was barely March. I watched him sitting there in his white undershirt, coffee mug in one hand, completely at ease in the life we'd built. The kitchen we'd renovated together 5 years ago, subway tile backsplash he'd installed himself because paying someone seemed foolish when YouTube existed. The breakfast table his father made as a wedding gift, now marked with 32 years of coffee rings and grandchildren's homework. At noon, I drove to Patricia's apartment complex in Vestavia Hills. She was waiting in the parking lot with her silver Toyota Camry already running. "You sure about this?" she asked, handing me the keys. "Once you know something, you can't unknow it." "I already know something's wrong," I told her. "I just don't know what." Patricia's car smelled like the vanilla air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror and the peppermints she kept in the console. I adjusted the seat, the mirrors, trying to make myself invisible in this unfamiliar vehicle. By the time I got back home, it was 4:45. I parked 3 houses down at the Washingtons who were visiting their daughter in Mobile. They'd asked me to collect their mail anyway. From there, I had a clear view of our driveway. At 5:10, Marcus emerged wearing his brown polo and those good jeans, carrying the same black duffel bag he'd been taking every Thursday. He threw it in the back of his Tahoe with the casual motion of routine. No hesitation, no looking around. Why would he? This was just another Thursday. I waited until he turned the corner before starting Patricia's car. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. 62 years old, following my own husband like some character in a mystery novel. Lord, What had my life become? The route to the Masonic Lodge on 3rd Avenue would have taken him straight down Highway 31. Instead, Marcus turned west on Highway 280, heading toward the suburbs. My chest tightened. I stayed 3 cars behind, grateful for the afternoon traffic. He drove past the Brookwood Mall, past the Summit, continuing into Hoover. Every mile taking us further from where he was supposed to be. The radio was playing Frankie Beverly and Maze, Before I Let Go, a song we danced to at countless weddings and anniversaries. I turned it off. The silence felt more honest. 20 minutes into the drive, Marcus pulled into a public shopping center. I held back, parking near the Starbucks where I could watch. He didn't go into the grocery store. Instead, he walked into Flowers by Rebecca, a little shop with a yellow awning and window boxes full of petunias. 10 minutes later, he emerged carrying a bouquet. Not roses, but mixed flowers. Gerbera daisies, white lilies, something purple I couldn't identify from the distance. The kind of arrangement you'd bring to someone who told you their favorite colors, their preferred flowers, the kind that showed you'd been paying attention. He placed them carefully in the front seat, not the back. Protected, important. The drive continued another 15 minutes into a neighborhood I'd never seen before. Tree-lined streets with brick mailboxes, 2-story houses set back from the road, the kind of suburb where they name the streets after Confederate generals or different types of trees. Marcus turned onto Magnolia Ridge Court. I pulled over at the corner, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine. Through the trees, I watched his Tahoe slow down, turn into a driveway about halfway down the street. A sage-green house with white shutters, a front porch with hanging ferns, a garden that somebody clearly tended with care. Counting to 100, I waited before creeping forward. Found a spot behind a landscaping truck where I could see but not be seen. Marcus was already at the front door, flowers in one hand, duffel bag in the other. The door opened before he could knock. She was younger than me, maybe early 50s, with copper-colored skin and natural hair styled in a twist-out that framed her face perfectly. Tall, maybe 5'8", wearing dark jeans and Marcus's Tuskegee University t-shirt. That shirt. That damn shirt with the bleach stain I'd made near the hem. The shirt he'd told me he donated to Goodwill. She was wearing it like women do when they're comfortable in their man's clothes. Oversized, casual, like she'd thrown it on that morning and hadn't thought twice about it. She smiled when she saw him. Not a polite smile, not a friendly smile, but the kind of smile I used to give him when he'd come home from a long day at work. The kind that said she'd been waiting, that his arrival was the best part of her day. Marcus handed her the flowers, and she stood on her tiptoes to kiss him. Not his cheek, his mouth, like it was natural, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. My vision blurred. I realized I'd been holding my breath and let it out in a rush that fogged the windshield. This was real. This was happening. My husband of 32 years was standing on another woman's porch, kissing her in broad daylight, in a neighborhood 20 miles from our home. They went inside, the door closing, with a finality that echoed in the car. I sat there, engine running, air conditioner blowing, but doing nothing for the heat spreading through my chest. Should I knock on the door? Confront them right now? Call Keisha? Call the police? What was the protocol for discovering your husband's other life? 5 minutes passed. 10. Through the front window, I could see shadows moving. Normal, domestic shadows, like any couple on a Thursday evening. My phone rang, Marcus Jr. calling. I let it go to voicemail. How could I talk to our son when I didn't even know who his father was anymore? An hour passed. The sun started its descent, painting the neighborhood golden. A man walked by with a beagle. Kids rode bikes, their laughter drifting through my cracked window. Normal suburban Thursday evening life continuing while mine imploded in a borrowed Toyota Camry. Through the house's side window, The kitchen, I realized. I could see them more clearly. She was cooking something, gesturing with a wooden spoon while she talked. Marcus was leaning against the counter, watching her with an expression I recognized but hadn't seen directed at me in years. Complete attention, absolute presence. He moved behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist while she stirred whatever was on the stove. She leaned back into him, comfortable, familiar. This wasn't new. This was established. This was routine. 2 hours later, when I saw them through the kitchen window slow dancing to what I knew was Luther Vandross, I realized I wasn't just watching my husband with another woman. I was watching him live an entirely different life. I knocked on that sage green door 3 times, each knock harder than the last, my wedding ring clicking against the wood like a judge's gavel. The door opened mid-fourth knock, and there she stood. This woman wearing my husband's college shirt, holding a dish towel, her face shifting from mild annoyance to complete confusion when she saw me instead of whoever she'd been expecting. "Can I help you?" she asked, and her voice was softer than I'd imagined. Cultured, the kind of voice that probably read bedtime stories with different character voices. "I'm Loretta Johnson," I said, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "Marcus's wife." The dish towel slipped from her hand, landing on the pristine doormat that read "Bless this home" in cursive letters. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like she was trying to find words in a language she'd suddenly forgotten. "His wife," she whispered, and then louder, turning toward the inside of the house. "Marcus, Marcus." He appeared in the doorway behind her, still in his brown polo but now wearing house slippers, the kind of casual domesticity that hit harder than any kiss I'd witnessed. When his eyes met mine, I watched the color drain from his face, starting at his hairline and working down like someone was slowly erasing him. "Ready," he breathed, my nickname sounding foreign in this context. In this doorway, in this life I didn't know existed. "Don't," I said, holding up my hand. "Don't you dare ready me right now." The woman, Diane, as I'd learn in a moment, looked between us, her hand clutching the doorframe. "You're married. You told me. You said you were divorced. You said it was finalized 2 years ago." "Can we not do this on the porch?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, the neighbors." "The neighbors?" I laughed, but it came out sharp, bitter. "You're worried about the neighbors? These neighbors who don't even know you're married?" But I walked inside anyway because 62 years of Southern upbringing doesn't disappear even when your world is crumbling. The house smelled like curry and coconut rice, something simmering on the stove that Marcus would never eat at home because he claimed spicy food gave him heartburn. The living room was tastefully decorated, earth tones, family photos on the mantel, a large abstract painting that looked expensive. And there, among the pictures, was Marcus. Marcus at a barbecue wearing an apron that said Grill Master. Marcus at what looked like a school play, his arm around a teenage boy. Marcus on Christmas morning, this past Christmas when he'd told me he was visiting Jerome's family, sitting by a tree I'd never seen, wearing a sweater I'd never bought him. "I'm Diane Peterson," the woman said, sinking onto the cream-colored couch like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. How long have you been married?" 32 years, I said, still standing, still looking at those photos. "Together, since college, 3 children, 5 grandchildren." Diane made a sound like someone had punched her in the stomach. "He said the divorce was because you grew apart, said you wanted different things in retirement, that it was mutual." Marcus stood between us like a man caught between 2 firing squads, which I suppose he was. "Diane, Loretta, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I turned on him. "Explain how you've been coming here every Thursday for how long? How many months, Marcus?" 17 months, Diane answered for him, her voice hollow. 17 months next week. We were planning. We were planning a trip to Savannah for our anniversary. Anniversary, they had an anniversary. It's not what it looks like, Marcus started, the classic line of every caught man since the beginning of time. Then what is it? I demanded. Because what it looks like is you've been living a double life. What it looks like is you've been lying to both of us. I never meant he stopped, ran his hand over his face the way he did when he was trying to organize his thoughts. Diane was going through a hard time when we met. Her husband had died, left her with debt, a son who was acting out. She needed help. So you divorced me in your imagination to help her? I asked, incredulous. There is no divorce, he said to Diane, who looked like she might vomit. I'm not divorced, but this isn't an affair either. Not an affair? I pointed at the photos. There's you at Christmas. There's you at what looks like a birthday party. You're living here. I don't live here, Marcus protested. I help out. Diane's son, Terrell, he needed a male figure. He was getting into trouble at school, hanging with the wrong crowd. I started mentoring him, and then, mentoring, I repeated, tasting the word like something rotten. Is that what we're calling it? Diane stood up suddenly, anger replacing shock on her face. We've been intimate, Marcus. Are you really going to stand here and pretend this was just about Terrell? And there it was. The word neither of us had said, but both of us knew. Intimate. My husband of 32 years had been intimate with another woman while coming home to our bed. How many Thursdays? I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. How many Thursdays have you been here playing house while I sat at home thinking you were at the lodge? Not every Thursday, he said, as if that made it better. Sometimes I really did go to the lodge. At first, the first few months. The first few months of 17 months, Diane said, doing the math we were all doing. So over a year of lies. Marcus sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 64 years. It started innocent. Jerome mentioned his coworker was struggling, single mother, son about to age out of the system without proper guidance. I thought I could help, just mentor the boy. Terrell, Diane said softly. His name is Terrell and he thinks of you as a father. You helped him get his grades up, taught him to drive, went to his parent-teacher conferences when I couldn't get off work. Parent-teacher conferences. My husband had been going to another child's parent-teacher conferences. The receipts, I said, understanding flooding through me. Firebirds, that expensive cologne, the clothes, that was all for this, for her, for them. I was trying to help, Marcus insisted. Diane works 2 jobs. Terrell needed things. School supplies, basketball shoes, registration fees for SAT prep. With our money, I said. With our retirement money. It's my money too, he shot back, then immediately looked like he regretted it. Your money, I repeated slowly. Your money that you earned while I raised your children, kept your house, supported your career, hosted your business dinners, took care of your mother when she had dementia. The room fell silent except for the sound of something bubbling over on the stove. Diane hurried to the kitchen, and I heard the gas clicking off, water running. Such normal sounds for such an abnormal moment. Where's Terrell now? I asked, needing to understand the full scope of this deception. Basketball practice, Diane answered, returning with tissues. He'll be home at 9. Marcus usually stays for dinner on Thursdays, helps him with homework after. Usually, regular routine, a whole choreographed life. Does he know Marcus is married? I asked. Both Diane and Marcus spoke at once. No. So you lied to a child, too, I said to Marcus, a vulnerable child who lost his father, and you lied to him about who you are. I was trying to protect him, Marcus said weakly. Protect him or protect yourself. I looked at Diane. What else has he told you about me? About our marriage? Diane wiped her eyes. Smearing makeup I noticed was carefully applied. She'd gotten pretty for him, for their Thursday. He said you were controlling, that you didn't understand his need for independence and retirement. that the divorce was bitter but necessary. Each word was a knife, controlling, after 32 years of supporting every dream he'd ever had. "Show her your ring," I told Marcus. "Show her the wedding ring you take off before you come here." Marcus's hand went automatically to his left hand, where the indent of his ring was still visible. Diane saw it too, saw the truth written in that small detail. "I need to know," I said, looking directly at Marcus. "Are you in love with her?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Diane leaned forward slightly, waiting. Marcus looked at the floor, then at me, then at Diane. "I care about both of you," he said finally, the coward's answer. "That's not what I asked." If you're watching this right now, let me tell you something about betrayal. It's not just the lies or the deception or even the intimacy given to someone else. It's the rewriting of your own history, the questioning of every memory, every shared moment. Was he thinking of her when we renewed our vows last year? When we picked out gifts for the grandkids last Christmas? When he held me during Mama's funeral? "I don't know what love means anymore," Marcus said, and for the first time since I'd knocked on that door, he sounded broken. "I know I didn't mean for this to happen. I know I never wanted to hurt either of you." "But you did," Diane said quietly. "You hurt both of us. You made me believe I'd found love again after losing my husband. You made me promises." "What promises?" I asked. "That we'd blend our families eventually, that once things were settled with the divorce, we'd introduce our children, that Terrell would have siblings, grandparents." She laughed bitterly. "I guess he already has them. He just doesn't know it." As I drove away from that house, leaving Marcus standing in the driveway calling my name, I realized I had two choices: destroy everything we'd built or find a way to understand why a good man does inexplicable things. I didn't speak to Marcus for 7 days, the longest we'd gone without talking since a fight about his mother moving in with us back in 1997. He slept in the guest room, the one we'd just refinished for when the grandkids visited. Every morning, I'd hear him get up at 5:30 like always, make his coffee with 3 sugars even though his doctor said to cut back, and sit on the back porch. Through the kitchen window, I'd watch him stare at nothing, still wearing his good watch, the one she'd given him, like he'd forgotten it was evidence of his deception. On day 8, Keisha called. "Mama, Daddy sounds strange. Is everything okay?" That's when I knew we had to tell the children. Not the brutal details, but enough truth to explain why their father was calling them at odd hours, voice thick with unshed tears. We gathered them on a Saturday, Keisha, Marcus Jr., and Damon, in the same living room where we'd celebrated every Christmas morning for 2 decades. Marcus sat in his recliner looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I took the couch, needing the distance. "Your father has something to tell you," I said, my voice steady as granite. Marcus looked at our children, successful, stable, believing in the foundation we'd given them, and I saw him realize he was about to crack that foundation. "I've been unfaithful to your mother," he said simply. No euphemisms, no explanations yet, just the raw truth. Keisha gasped. Marcus Jr.'s jaw tightened exactly like his father's did when he was angry. Damon, our baby at 28, just stared. "For how long?" Marcus Jr. asked, his voice dangerous. 17 months. "The lodge," Keisha whispered, understanding flooding her face. There was no lodge, was there? The conversation that followed was harder than childbirth, harder than burying my mama, harder than anything I'd faced in 62 years. Our children's image of their father, the deacon, the provider, the man who taught them about integrity, shattered in real time. But here's what surprised me. After the anger, after Damon stormed out and Marcus Jr. said things that can't be unsaid, Keisha asked the question that changed everything. "Daddy, why? What were you looking for that you couldn't find here?" Marcus broke down then, this 6-foot-tall man who'd never cried at funerals, sobbing in his recliner. I wanted to matter again. Retirement made me feel invisible, useless. Diane's son needed a father figure. She needed help. They made me feel necessary. "We need you," Damon said from the doorway, having returned. "Your grandkids need you. Mama needs you." "No," Marcus said quietly. "You all love me, but you don't need me. Not anymore. You're all successful, independent. Even your mama. She adjusted to retirement like she'd been waiting for it her whole life. But I felt like I disappeared the day I turned in my badge." That's when I suggested therapy. Dr. Evelyn Chambers, a Black woman therapist on the North Side who specialized in senior couples, became our Thursday appointment, a deliberate choice to reclaim that day. The first session, Marcus could barely look at me. By the fourth, we were both crying. By the eighth, we were talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Marcus has what we call a savior complex, Dr. Chambers explained during one session. His identity is tied to being needed, to fixing problems. When retirement removed that role, he unconsciously sought it elsewhere. "But why lie?" I asked. "Why create this elaborate deception?" "Because admitting he felt useless in his own family would mean admitting failure," she said. The lie allowed him to be a hero in one world while maintaining his image in another. The moment I decided to try, really try, came during session 12. Marcus was describing Terrell, the boy he'd been mentoring, and his face lit up talking about how the kid's grades improved, how he'd made the basketball team, how he'd started considering college. "You could have done all that without the lies," I said. "We could have mentored him together." Marcus looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since that night in Diane's living room. "Would you have understood if I'd said I wanted to help raise another woman's son?" "I would have tried," I said, and meant it. "But you didn't give me the chance." 6 months of counseling taught us new vocabulary: boundaries, transparency, emotional availability. Marcus had to cut all contact with Diane and Terrell. The hardest part, watching him grieve the loss of that boy who'd seen him as a father. He gave me all his passwords, his phone, access to everything. We established new routines that didn't leave room for deception. The trust, that's different. Trust isn't rebuilt. It's redesigned from scratch with different materials. Where are we now? Still together 2 years later. But we're different people in a different marriage. Marcus volunteers with the Boys and Girls Club, channeling that need to mentor into something honest. I go with him sometimes, teaching the girls about financial literacy while he shows the boys basic car maintenance. Every Thursday now, Marcus goes to actual lodge meetings, and yes, I've verified it with Jerome. But sometimes I catch him looking at his phone with a sadness I recognize. Not because he misses her, but because he misses the man he thought he could be for everyone. Tell me in the comments, could you forgive what Marcus did? Not just the affair, but the elaborate lie, the second family, the rewriting of who you were in his story. I ask because forgiveness is an endorsement. It's freedom. Freedom from carrying the weight of someone else's choices. If you're watching this from Atlanta, Houston, Detroit, or anywhere else where strong Black women are trying to hold families together despite the cracks, know that you're not alone. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me what time it is where you are. Sometimes just knowing others are awake with our struggles makes the load lighter. For women facing similar discoveries, here's what I learned. The difference between privacy and secrecy in marriage is that privacy protects the relationship, while secrecy protects one person from consequences. Marcus thought he was maintaining privacy, but he was hoarding secrets that poisoned everything they touched. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to remember differently. I remember 32 years of partnership alongside 17 months of betrayal. Both are true. Both are part of our story. If this story touched something in you, whether it's anger, recognition, or hope, Please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories from real women who faced the impossible and chosen to keep going. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not crazy for suspecting something's wrong, or that they're not weak for choosing to stay and work through it. The last thing I'll say is this: love isn't just a feeling that happens to you. After a certain age, after certain betrayals, love becomes a choice you make every morning when you wake up next to someone who hurt you but is trying to heal with you. Some days I choose it easily. Other days I choose it through gritted teeth, but I choose it. And maybe that's the real tragedy in all of this. Sometimes the person who betrays us the most is the one trying the hardest to be good.